My ex-wife came to my house with her new husband and new children and told me to leave because it's her home now. The story I'm about to tell started in the most unexpected way. One of those you wouldn't believe me if I told you kinds of things. I was 28, living in Chicago and working in event coordination, constantly juggling weddings, conferences, and weekend wine expos. Nothing in my life was particularly cinematic until one Monday morning changed everything. I met a man named Noah Carter in the most cliché and yet most surreal way possible. We were both trapped inside an elevator. The power had cut out in this 20-story corporate tower where I had gone to scout a venue. Noah was there for a business pitch. I remember the jolt as everything went dark, then the emergency lights kicked on. I expected panic, but instead, the guy across from me, dark curly hair, leather laptop bag, calm as can be, cracked a joke about the building, finally testing our survival skills. We ended up stuck there for over 2 hours. 2 hours of cramped space, flickering lights, and spotty emergency updates. And yet, I wasn't mad about it. We talked about everything: books, childhood, career dreams, family scars, and even shared the only food we had, half a granola bar from my bag. He listened, really listened, in a way few people ever do. By the time the doors creaked open, I didn't want to leave. Fast forward 2 years, and Noah and I were married. It sounds fast, but it felt right. We bought a beautiful 3-bedroom house in Boulder, Colorado. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. He had his office upstairs, and I had my little greenhouse in the backyard where I kept my orchids and lemons. We adopted a golden retriever named Tucker, and life was just good. Not perfect, but close. Noah never did things halfway. Every birthday, every anniversary, every just because moment, he'd make it memorable. On my 30th birthday, he surprised me with a 3-day trip to Jackson Hole, complete with horseback riding and hot spring dips. The year after that, he flew my 3 best friends out and set up an entire spa retreat weekend at a mountain lodge. When I turned 32, he decorated the entire house with notes, each one a memory, a promise, a reason he loved me. I used to joke that I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, because it all seemed too good to be true. But back then, I never really believed it would. I thought I had finally won at love. And maybe I had for a while. But every story has a twist. And mine started with an elevator door opening, and ended with a truth I never saw coming. 3 weeks before my 30th birthday, Craig came home with that look, the one that told me something was off before he even said a word. He dropped his bag by the door, loosened his tie like it was choking him, and muttered that his company had just announced a mandatory team-building retreat in California. Of all weekends, of course it had to land on my birthday. I didn't say anything right away, just leaned against the kitchen counter and waited for him to keep talking. He looked genuinely upset, ran his hands through his hair, and called his boss an idiot for scheduling it without consulting the team first. "I swear, I'll make it up to you when I get back," he said, walking over to wrap his arms around me. The next few days felt weird. I tried not to sulk, tried to tell myself it wasn't a big deal. I knew it wasn't his fault, and I didn't want to be the kind of partner who guilt-tripped someone over work. Still, I'd been quietly looking forward to this birthday. It was a milestone, and Craig always went out of his way to make it special. This year, I had imagined a weekend getaway, just the two of us, or even just staying in and watching old movies with pizza and cake. Instead, I was going to spend it alone, while he was stuck doing trust falls and PowerPoint presentations with his colleagues in Napa Valley. The night before he left, Craig came into the bedroom with a small velvet box and handed it to me without a word. Inside were delicate sapphire earrings, my birthstone. "I know it's early," he said, "but I didn't want to wait. Don't be sad, okay?" I smiled and kissed him, trying to hide the disappointment still coiling in my stomach. I helped him pack his suitcase afterward, folding his dress shirts and rolling up his jeans the way he liked. He tossed in a few toiletries and that ridiculous bright orange company t-shirt with the words Synergy Summit 2023 printed across the front. I laughed, and he made a face, saying, "If I don't come back, it's because I got buried under a pile of corporate buzzwords." I told him not to be dramatic and folded the shirt neatly before zipping the bag shut. On the day of my birthday, I woke up to an unusually quiet house. Tucker padded into the room with sleepy eyes and curled up next to me, his soft breathing the only sound. The morning felt slow, heavy almost, like the weight of the silence had settled into the walls. I made myself coffee, scrolled through a few birthday messages, and tried not to notice how empty the kitchen felt without Craig humming some ridiculous tune while scrambling eggs. By evening, I decided I wasn't going to cook. I wasn't in the mood to light candles or set the table like I normally did on special days. I ordered sushi from my favorite spot, the one Craig always joked was our backup anniversary dinner, because it never disappointed. I put on my comfiest sweater, opened a bottle of white wine, and curled up on the couch with a show I'd been meaning to binge for weeks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. Later, I called my parents. My mom answered on the second ring, her voice warm and cheerful until I told her I was spending the evening alone. There was a pause, just long enough to feel it, before she said, "Oh, Craig's not with you." I told her he had a work retreat in California and tried to laugh it off. She didn't push, just said, "Well, that's too bad," and quickly shifted the conversation to the orchids in her kitchen and my dad's recent obsession with air fryers. After the call, I sat on the couch with my half-finished wine and Tucker asleep at my feet. I wasn't sad exactly, just quiet. There was a dull ache in my chest that I tried to ignore. I reminded myself not to be dramatic. It's work. People miss birthdays all the time. He didn't choose the timing. He even got me earrings. I knew all of that, but somehow, none of it made the room feel any less empty. The day after Craig came back from California, things felt almost normal again. He brought me chocolate from the airport and told me about some wine tasting they squeezed into the last night of the retreat. I listened, nodded, smiled in the right places, but something about his stories felt rehearsed. I chalked it up to jet lag and tried to shake the feeling. That afternoon, while folding laundry in the bedroom, my phone buzzed with a message from Melissa, a girl I knew through mutual friends, someone I'd chatted with maybe twice at parties, but wouldn't call a friend. It was short. Just, "Hey, can you call me when you're alone?" My stomach dropped, not because I expected anything specific, but because texts like that never lead anywhere good. I stared at the screen for a minute, then replied, "Sure, give me 10. I waited until Craig went out to walk Tucker before calling. Melissa picked up immediately. Her voice was tight, hesitant, like she didn't know if she should even be doing this. "I'm sorry if this is overstepping," she began, "but I thought you should see something." There was a long pause, and I could hear her breathing before she finally said, "A friend of mine posted a story from a spa in Santa Barbara last weekend. I think Craig's in it." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Then she sent the video. It was only 7 seconds long. Filmed in the mirror of a luxury spa changing area, the caption said "post-massage glow," followed by 2 champagne emojis. The girl filming had her hair wrapped in a towel, wearing a white robe, and behind her, just barely in the frame, was Craig, shirtless, laughing, leaning toward another woman as she handed him a glass of champagne. My throat went dry. Melissa spoke again, this time softer. "I wasn't sure at first, but I double-checked the hotel tag. That's definitely Santa Barbara. And that's definitely not a corporate retreat." I watched the video again, this time holding the phone so close my fingers trembled. The resolution wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. There was Craig, clear as day, wearing that navy vest I had folded into his suitcase just a few days ago. The same one he said he needed for the cooler evening workshops. His hair was damp, probably from a steam room or a shower, and he looked relaxed, too relaxed. His arm was slung casually across someone's back, fingertips resting lightly at the edge of her waist in a way that made my skin crawl. Then she turned just enough for the camera to catch her face. Olivia, my sister. She was laughing, her head tilted back slightly like she'd just heard the world's funniest joke. Her hair was up in a bun, and she wore the earrings I gave her last Christmas, delicate hoops with tiny emerald studs. They shimmered under the spa's soft lighting as she leaned into Craig's touch. My breath caught in my throat. They looked close, intimate, like 2 people who knew each other's rhythms. Not coworkers, not acquaintances. Certainly not people who had accidentally crossed paths at a corporate event. There was no hint of a conference room or a retreat badge or even a casual mention of work. Just the clink of champagne glasses and the kind of shared gaze that doesn't happen between people who are supposed to love you in different ways. My husband, my sister, together, at a luxury spa in Santa Barbara. On my birthday, I kept watching the loop of that story over and over, hoping it would look different the next time. But it never did. The shock faded fast, and was replaced with something sharper, focus. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was already moving. I opened our joint bank app, the one Craig insisted we use for transparency. I scrolled through the recent activity, and there it was, one glaring transaction that hadn't been there the last time I checked. $1,200 withdrawn in cash from an ATM on the Friday morning he left. The note field was blank. My heart started pounding, not just from the number, but from the timing. He'd left for California that same morning, supposedly for a company retreat. I reached for my wallet, the one I kept tucked away in my nightstand drawer, the one that had held the $800 my grandmother gave me last month. "Spend it on something fun," she'd said. 30 is special. But when I opened the zippered pocket, it was empty. I counted 3 times just to be sure, like maybe I had misremembered, but I hadn't. Every last bill was gone. I sat back on the bed, staring at the open drawer like it might explain itself. Then I grabbed my phone and called the spa. I didn't even hesitate. I told them I was just trying to get a copy of the receipt for a work reimbursement report, something my husband needed for tax purposes. The woman on the phone was polite, cheerful even, and didn't ask many questions. She pulled up the reservation immediately. Yes, there had been a 2-night stay under the name Craig Carter. And yes, they had booked the romantic recharge package for two. A suite with a private balcony, daily couples massages, and a champagne brunch. She even offered to email me the itemized bill if I needed it. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at my reflection in the bedroom mirror. Romantic package for two. My husband, my sister, my money, my birthday. And somehow, none of it felt real, just a cold, clinical pile of evidence stacking itself higher with every minute. I waited until after dinner, not because I was trying to be polite, but because I wanted to see if he would say anything, offer up some kind of lie or explanation before I put everything in front of him. He didn't. He acted normal, maybe a little distant, but nothing that would have made anyone suspect he had spent the weekend wrapped around my sister in a luxury spa suite. When we cleared the dishes, I walked into the living room, pulled out my phone, and handed it to him. "Watch this," I said, my voice flat. He barely made it halfway through the video before his face changed. First pale, then flushed, like the blood was fighting to figure out where to go. His mouth opened, then closed. I could almost see the wheels turning, trying to decide whether to deny it, deflect it, or deflate completely. Finally, he set the phone down carefully on the coffee table and said, "It's not what it looks like." I stared at him, waiting. "She's been going through a rough time," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know how Olivia is. She's always up and down. I just wanted to be there for her." It was nothing like that. I didn't say anything. I just walked into the kitchen, pulled out the printout of the booking confirmation from the spa, romantic recharge package for two, Mr. Craig Carter, and laid it in front of him. "Supportive," I repeated quietly, pointing to the champagne brunch and couples massages. "Is that what we're calling this now?" He stared at the paper for a long time, then finally dropped the act. His voice changed, got lower, defensive. "Fine. You want the truth? Yeah, I went with her. Yeah, I used the money. But you shouldn't have expected anything for your birthday at all. You always act like everything has to be perfect. It's exhausting." I blinked, stunned not just by the confession, but by how quickly he turned it on me, as if I had somehow made him spend my grandmother's gift on a secret trip with my sister. As if expecting your husband to be present on your birthday, or to not lie about where he is, was some kind of burden. I didn't speak. I couldn't. He just sat there, breathing heavily, as if I was the one who owed him an apology. For the next several days, I didn't say a single word to Craig, not in passing, not over breakfast, not even when he followed me from room to room ranting or trying to apologize. I wasn't interested in anything he had to say, not his tantrums when I ignored him, not the shallow guilt tripping he tried to pass off as remorse. The silence between us became a living thing, stretched tight across every hallway and every closed door, and I let it grow. He oscillated between pathetic attempts at sympathy and explosive, self-pitying anger. One minute he'd sit on the edge of the bed muttering, "I screwed up, okay? But we can get past this." And the next he'd be slamming drawers in the kitchen, barking about how I was being childish or refusing to have a real conversation. I kept my face blank and my mouth shut. There was nothing left to say. Anything that once lived in my throat, words of love, of disappointment, of fury, it had all shriveled into ash. And I didn't tell anyone. Not my mom, not my dad, not even Olivia, especially not Olivia. The thought of saying her name out loud made me feel like I might break something. I couldn't bring myself to craft the sentence. My husband and my sister. I couldn't imagine how it would sound, or how anyone would respond. I was suspended in a kind of fog, surrounded by shattered pieces of something I didn't know how to rebuild. Every time my phone rang or buzzed with a text from one of them, I let it go unanswered. I didn't trust myself to explain what had happened without falling apart, and I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of being part of the story just yet. Not until I knew what I wanted. Not until I could breathe without feeling like I was choking on glass. The message came in while I was folding towels, trying to lose myself in the most mundane task I could find. My phone buzzed once, just once, and when I picked it up, I saw her name. Olivia. No greeting, no explanation, just a single line that made my stomach twist. "Sorry, it just happened." I stared at it for a long time. The audacity of it. The cowardice. The casual way she tried to wrap a betrayal in 3 hollow words. I didn't respond. I didn't even allow myself to react. I simply took a screenshot, opened a new message to my mother, and sent it without a caption. Then I put my phone on silent and went back to folding towels. An hour later, I picked it back up to find 30 missed calls. Most were from my mom, a few from my dad, and one from a number I didn't recognize but could guess. Olivia. I didn't listen to any of the voicemails. I didn't read any of the texts that followed. I didn't need to. They had all finally seen it. Later that night, my mom called again, and this time I answered. I didn't say anything. I just let her speak. Her voice cracked immediately, asking if it was true, if what Olivia said could possibly be real. She sounded broken in a way I hadn't heard since my grandfather passed. I told her everything I could manage without unraveling, and when she started to cry, I just sat there, staring at the dark ceiling, letting it all hit her the way it had hit me. It was only the next day that I heard from Olivia again, another message, longer this time, desperate. She said they hadn't meant for it to happen, that it wasn't planned, that she and Craig had been going through something serious for months. As if the slow rot of their deceit somehow made it less revolting. As if dragging it out over time made it more understandable. She didn't apologize again. She didn't beg for forgiveness. She just confessed, like it would clear her conscience to unload it onto me. And maybe it did, but it didn't do a damn thing for mine. The fallout started fast. Once the truth was out, it couldn't be contained, and my brother Zach wasted no time setting fire to what little remained of family diplomacy. He blew up the group chat that had once been used for birthday plans and holiday menus. His message was long, brutal, and exact. He tore Olivia apart line by line, calling her a disgrace, a parasite, a traitor who had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He said she didn't just betray me. She'd ripped the foundation of the entire family apart, and he wanted nothing to do with her again. Our father chimed in a few hours later with something that hit harder than any insult. He simply wrote, "I am disappointed to the core." That was it. 7 words. But coming from him, a man who rarely expressed emotion, it felt like a sentence Olivia would never shake off. My mother called me late that night, her voice swollen from crying, and said she didn't know what to say except that she was on my side. She didn't try to defend Olivia. She didn't try to find excuses. She just kept repeating, "I'm so sorry," over and over, like she was trying to erase the entire week with sheer regret. I didn't cry. I couldn't. The pain was too dense, sitting in my chest like concrete. But I appreciated her finally choosing a side, even if it was too late to stop the damage. The next day, I sat down at my laptop and opened the financial dashboard Craig and I had used when we bought the house. He had always insisted on managing the bills, claiming it was easier with his schedule and more efficient if one person handled everything. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Now, I dove into every link, every statement, and every login I could remember. What I found made me nauseous. There were 3 credit cards in his name, all with balances I'd never seen before. Not once had he mentioned them. One had nearly $9,000 in charges, including upscale restaurants, hotel stays, and boutique shopping I had never been part of. I cross-referenced the dates with his calendar. The same nights he told me he was working late or at networking dinners, he was whining and dining my sister. I even recognized one of the places, a bistro I'd once suggested for our anniversary, the one he said was too expensive for what it was. He was paying for it all with our money, my money, the money I'd earned managing events every weekend, every late-night shift. He used my trust like a credit line, spent it recklessly, and never thought twice. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. Of time. Of love. Of everything I thought we were building. And Olivia had sat there, across those candlelit tables, knowing exactly what she was helping to destroy. The first thing I did after uncovering everything was book an appointment with a lawyer. I found someone with experience in high-conflict divorces and financial manipulation, and I sat in their office with a folder full of printed statements, screenshots, and timelines. She listened carefully, flipping through the documents with a sharp, calm focus, and when I was done talking, she looked at me and said, "Do not leave the house. Not yet. Not until we file and get the paperwork in motion. Leaving now could affect your share of the property or how it's perceived later." It wasn't what I wanted to hear. Every fiber of me wanted to run. But I understood. I needed to be smart, not just hurt. So I stayed for now. I avoided Craig as much as possible, slept in the guest room, and kept my distance. But emotionally, I was already gone. My cousin Jared stepped in like a lifeline. He had just finished renovating a small house on the edge of town, one he planned to flip but hadn't listed yet. When I told him what was going on, he didn't even hesitate. "It's yours," he said. "Stay as long as you need. No questions. No pity. Just quiet support." It was the first time in days I felt like I could breathe. While I waited for the lawyer to finalize the filing, I started separating myself piece by piece from the life Craig and I had built. I packed slowly and deliberately, documenting everything I touched. One afternoon, I found the watch, a sleek, expensive piece he'd bought just a month earlier and paid for entirely with our joint funds. $2,100. He told me it was for a client presentation, said image was everything. I took the receipt and the box and drove to the store myself. They hesitated at first, but with the original packaging and proof of purchase, they processed the return. As soon as the refund hit our account, I transferred half, exactly half, into a brand new account in my name alone. Clean. Untouched. He could keep the lies, the receipts, the stories. But not my money. Not anymore. Every little step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. And I wasn't going to stop until every last piece was mine again. I waited until a Tuesday morning, the kind of weekday where Craig always left the house early for meetings downtown, dressed in one of his tailored suits with a coffee in hand and a lie on his lips. As soon as I heard the front door close and his car pull out of the driveway, I got to work. The bags had already been packed and hidden in the garage for days. Jared showed up right on time with his truck, and together we loaded everything in silence. Clothes, my laptop, a few framed photos I couldn't leave behind, and the box with the documents my lawyer told me to keep close. I didn't take everything, just what was mine. The rest I left behind. His suits, the cookware we bought together, the furniture we once picked out on lazy Sundays. Let it all rot. Let him sit in it. Before I left, I walked back inside one last time. The house was quiet, sunlight spilling in through the blinds, making everything look deceptively peaceful. On the kitchen counter, I placed the spare key, my wedding ring, and a note I had written the night before. I didn't second-guess it. I didn't edit a word. In clean handwriting, it said, _ you were right. I don't know how to keep a man. But as it turns out, neither does your mistress, _ Then I walked out and closed the door behind me without looking back. By the time Craig got home, the house was half empty and the silence was louder than anything I could have said. My phone started ringing within minutes. First once, then again, then again. He left voicemails, each more panicked than the last. Where are you? What the hell is going on? Amber, we need to talk. Please. I didn't answer. I didn't listen. I just stared at the screen and let it all go to voicemail, one call after another, until the battery died and took his voice with it. Craig didn't go down without trying to pull every manipulative trick he had left. The messages shifted from pleading to guilt-tripping to veiled threats, all within a matter of days. When that didn't work, his sister called me, her voice laced with fake concern but barely hiding the real agenda. She said Craig was having problems at work, that things were already bad enough, and asked if I could just handle things quietly so he wouldn't ruin his reputation. I didn't respond to her either. Eventually, Craig reached out through my lawyer, proposing a divorce, but only under certain conditions. He wanted me to keep the affair off the record, no official mention, no public statements, nothing that could tie his name to the truth. Apparently, what mattered most to him now wasn't the marriage, but the optics. So I made him an offer of my own. I told him I'd agree to keep the details private, as long as he covered 80% of the legal fees. No negotiation, no extensions, just a number and a signature. He agreed. After that, everything moved fast. The paperwork was filed, the account split, and the house officially listed for sale. I signed my name where I had to and watched the pieces of that life shrink down to a few sheets of paper. Once it was over, I rented a new apartment in a quieter part of town. Nothing flashy, just clean, bright, and completely mine. I deleted my old Instagram, wiped the pictures, the tags, the digital scrapbook of a life that no longer existed. I started fresh, a new account, a new name, no traces. And for the first time in over a year, I started making plans that didn't include anyone else's needs but my own. My 31st birthday is coming up soon, and I've already booked a week in Costa Rica. No gifts, no fake surprises, no waiting by the phone, just a suitcase, a passport, and a coastline I've never walked before. I'm finally ready to celebrate a year that belongs entirely to me. 2 weeks after the divorce filing had been finalized and I was finally settling into something that resembled peace, my attorney called me first thing on a Monday morning. Her tone was clipped and professional, but I could hear the tension in her voice. "We've received a countersuit," she said. For a second, I couldn't even process the words. A countersuit? Against me? Craig, apparently not satisfied with destroying our marriage and bleeding our finances, had filed a surprise lawsuit claiming I had damaged his professional reputation by disclosing confidential information. According to the papers, he was accusing me of intentionally and maliciously distributing sensitive personal content to colleagues at his firm. Specifically, he alleged that I had leaked the spa video. Yes, the same Instagram story Melissa had sent me, to his coworkers, causing irreparable harm to his standing and potential earnings. And somehow, he didn't stop there. He also included an accusation of attempted witness tampering, saying that his sister, my sister, Olivia, was now living in fear and felt pressured by external parties not to speak freely. He painted her as a victim, fragile and harassed, conveniently erasing the part where she helped him orchestrate a lie that spanned months. I sat on the edge of my bed, clutching the phone, trying to keep my breathing steady while my lawyer explained the next steps. The claims were absurd. I hadn't leaked anything. I hadn't sent the video to anyone outside of a private conversation with my lawyer and 2 friends, people I trusted implicitly. I never once threatened Olivia. I hadn't spoken to her since the day she confessed. In fact, I'd done everything in my power to keep things private, even agreeing not to make the affair official in the paperwork, even when it burned to let that detail disappear. But Craig wasn't looking for truth. He was looking for control. Again, this lawsuit wasn't about justice or damage. It was about revenge. He was angry that I walked away. Angry that he couldn't spin the narrative. Angry that no matter how much he tried to bury the truth, it still lived in someone else's memory. And now, he was trying to drag me back into his chaos, paper by paper, claim by claim. My lawyer assured me we would fight it. The burden of proof was his, and his accusations were flimsy at best. But still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being cornered, ambushed after finally finding space to breathe. I had thought I was done with Craig. Clearly, Craig wasn't done with me. The moment we walked into the courtroom for the first hearing, I felt the air shift. Craig had brought in Leo Marshall, one of those lawyers with a reputation that preceded him like a bad smell. I'd heard the name before through whispers in legal circles and cautionary tales online. He was known for his scorched earth approach, the kind of man who turned divorce into a battlefield and relished in the casualties. Leo didn't disappoint. He stood tall in a custom-tailored suit, all smug confidence and fake charm, and within minutes of the hearing starting, he showed his true colors. "Women are often dramatic when they lose a man," he said, glancing at me with a smirk before returning his eyes to the judge. "It's a classic." There was a small gasp in the room, but he didn't flinch. He kept going like he was auditioning for a courtroom drama, throwing in just enough condescension to make my skin crawl, but not quite enough to be called out for contempt. The judge, Miriam Clayton, kept her face neutral. Too neutral. She sat still, lips pressed together, hands folded carefully on the bench. She didn't reprimand Leo for the comment. She didn't even acknowledge it. I watched her closely, waiting for the smallest hint of reaction, but there was nothing. Just the faintest tension in her jaw that came and went in a blink. After the hearing, as we walked out of the courtroom, Tia, my attorney, was unusually quiet. Normally, she debriefed on the spot, running through next steps and possible motions. But this time, she looked distracted, like something wasn't sitting right with her. Later that evening, she called me. Her voice was low, cautious. "There's something you need to know," she said. Apparently, a colleague of hers had mentioned in passing that Leo Marshall had recently attended a private dinner hosted by Judge Clayton just last month. It wasn't a fundraiser or a public function. It was a closed-door, invite-only event held at her residence. The kind of gathering that didn't show up on court calendars, but carried a heavy weight of implication. Tia didn't say the word corruption. She didn't have to. The timing, the familiarity, the lack of objection to Leo's behavior, it all pointed to something very wrong. I felt the floor shift again, that same sickening feeling I had when Craig filed the lawsuit. It wasn't just personal anymore. Now it felt systemic. Like I wasn't just up against him. I was up against a game rigged from the inside. I was done playing defense. After the first hearing and the disgusting performance Leo Marshall put on, I sat across from Tia in her office and told her flat out, "I want to counter. I want the court to hear every last piece of what Craig did. No more silence, no more protecting reputations, and no more walking away quietly." Tia didn't flinch. She leaned forward, nodded once, and said, "Then let's hit them where it hurts." Within 48 hours, we filed a counterclaim for non-pecuniary damages, emotional distress, reputational harm, psychological impact, all of it backed by the facts they had so arrogantly left in the open like I wouldn't dare touch them. We detailed Craig's affair with my sister Olivia, making it clear this wasn't just infidelity. It was betrayal by someone within my own bloodline, a level of emotional harm no rational person could dismiss. We outlined the theft of the $800 in cash, money my grandmother had given me, which I had saved quietly and tucked away, only for Craig to steal it from my wallet like a coward. We broke down the misuse of joint funds, including the watch, the restaurants, and the luxury spa trip in Santa Barbara, where he spent our shared money on massages and champagne with someone he never even had the guts to admit he was sleeping with. Most damning of all was the financial manipulation. 3 credit cards, hidden balances, secret purchases. He had intentionally kept those debts out of sight, using them to build a separate life while I was paying the mortgage, covering groceries, and thinking we were building something real. We presented it all. Every receipt, every timestamp, every last detail. And we weren't done. Tia filed a motion to call witnesses. We subpoenaed Craig's company accountant, who had access to expense logs, and would be able to confirm whether or not Craig's trip was ever authorized as a business retreat. We listed the spa worker who had taken the reservation, the one who had confirmed over the phone that it was a romantic package for two under Craig's name. And then we added someone unexpected, our old neighbor from Denver, who had heard one of Craig's late-night screaming fits back when the lies started to crack. She had offered to write a statement, but we wanted her in court. This time, we weren't just defending ourselves. We were tearing the mask off. If they wanted to turn this into a show, I was ready to be the main act. Before the second hearing even began, Leo Marshall submitted a motion to exclude the spa video from the case entirely. He stood there, smug as ever, arguing that the footage had been taken without the knowledge or consent of the people in it, and therefore violated his client's privacy. It's inadmissible, he said, and more importantly, irrelevant. This isn't a reality show, it's a courtroom. Tia didn't even hesitate. She stood, her tone firm but razor-sharp, and countered with facts. The video had been published on a public Instagram story, visible to any follower of the account, including the person who had sent it to me. It had never been recorded secretly. It had never been hacked or leaked. It was public domain, she said. It was posted voluntarily by someone else, and it directly supports the plaintiff's claim of moral injury. The man in the video is the defendant. The woman is the plaintiff's sister. That is the context. That is the relevance. Judge Clayton sat in silence for a moment, fingers steepled against her mouth. Then she ruled. The video would be allowed, but with conditions. It could be played and discussed in court, but it would not be distributed outside the courtroom, and it would not be submitted to public record. It was a compromise, and not the worst one. Later, when it was my turn to take the stand, Leo changed tactics. He didn't go after facts. He went after me. I could feel it coming, the way he circled around his questions, letting them drip with implication rather than accusation. Then he asked it. Mrs. Carter, are you jealous that your husband was happy with another woman? There was a pause. A silence so thick I could feel the courtroom lean forward. But I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I sat up straighter, met his eyes, and said calmly, I'm not jealous. I'm disgusted. Not because he was happy with someone else, but because he was lying to me while doing it. Happiness built on betrayal isn't happiness. It's cowardice. He moved on quickly after that. No follow-up. No smirk. Just a brief flicker of discomfort before he looked down at his notes. And in that moment, I knew I had taken something from him. Control. Narrative. Maybe even a little pride. The third hearing started like the others. Tense. Calculated. Every movement in the courtroom sharpened by strategy. But Tia had been holding something close to the chest, and that morning, she played it. When she stood and called the next witness, I saw Leo shift slightly in his seat. He hadn't expected this. Tia called Ellie, a woman I hadn't seen in nearly a year, but who had once been one of my closest friends. We drifted apart when Craig started isolating me from the people who knew me best, but here she was, stepping forward anyway. She walked up confidently, took the oath, and sat with a composed ease that made Leo's eyes narrow. Tia asked a few preliminary questions about Ellie's role in Craig's company. She confirmed she had worked in the HR department for 4 years and had access to internal scheduling, calendars, and employee travel approvals. Then Tia asked the question we had been waiting for. Ms. Porter, can you tell the court if any official company retreat or off-site event was scheduled for the weekend of September 16th? Ellie didn't even pause. No, there was nothing on the calendar for that weekend. No event was planned, no travel was authorized, and no other employees were scheduled to be out of town. Craig Carter was not attending anything company-related. The courtroom went dead silent. Ellie continued, stating that she had brought with her a time-stamped internal memo sent to the team the week prior, listing all scheduled events and employee leave requests. Craig's name wasn't on it. There was no retreat, no training, no team-building exercise, just a lie built to cover a spa weekend with my sister. Leo stood up so abruptly his chair screeched against the floor. He demanded a recess, citing procedural fairness and the need to review new evidence. But Judge Clayton barely looked up from her notes as she denied it. This witness was disclosed within the appropriate window. Proceed. For the first time, Leo looked rattled. He shuffled his notes, whispered harshly to Craig, who was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, red blooming across his neck. The lie had been clean, simple, and easy to maintain, until now. With one document and one voice, it crumbled in front of everyone. A few days after Ellie's testimony turned the entire direction of the case, Tia called me in the middle of the night. Her voice was sharp, awake, and vibrating with restrained energy. She had just received an anonymous email, no subject line, no text, just a single attachment. When she opened it, what stared back at her was a high-resolution photo taken on a yacht somewhere off the coast. In the foreground, clear as day, was Leo Marshall in a pair of designer sunglasses, holding a drink and laughing. Next to him stood Judge Miriam Clayton, leaning casually against the railing. And just behind them, unmistakable even in a polo and boat shoes, was the CEO of the company Craig worked for. No amount of legal maneuvering could explain that image away. The next morning, Tia filed a formal motion to disqualify Judge Clayton from the case on grounds of a clear conflict of interest. The evidence spoke for itself: social connection, undisclosed affiliation, and now, direct links to the defendant's employer. It was more than suspicious. It was unethical. The court scheduled a short hearing to review the motion. Clayton, tight-lipped and unreadable, didn't deny the photograph. She didn't even try. After a tense silence, she announced she would be recusing herself from the case to maintain the court's impartiality and public trust. Her words were formal, but her expression was something else: cornered. With that, the case was reassigned. Judge Thomas Burnett took over within 48 hours. He was known for his no-nonsense demeanor and clean reputation, a man who didn't care for courtroom theatrics or backdoor alliances. As soon as the new docket was posted, Tia called me and said, "Now we fight on fair ground." For the first time since the trial began, I felt the smallest hint of justice begin to settle. The truth wasn't just being told, it was starting to matter. In the final stage of the trial, with the courtroom packed and tension pulsing in the air, Tia stood with the calm precision of someone who had waited months for this exact moment. She approached the bench with a thick binder of documents, neatly tabbed and highlighted. "Your Honor," she said, "we would like to submit a complete financial breakdown of the defendant's undisclosed accounts." Judge Burnett nodded, and the screen in the courtroom lit up as Tia began to walk through every detail. One by one, she displayed bank statements, credit card records, and payment logs, each transaction tied to Craig's 3 hidden accounts. There were charges for expensive restaurants, weekend hotel stays, custom floral arrangements, and even a high-end boutique Olivia once mentioned in passing. Every swipe, every reservation, every charge, all of it pointed to the same destination: my sister. Craig shifted in his seat. The color drained from his face, then came back with a deep red flush that crept up his neck. He whispered something to Leo, who leaned in quickly, face tense, lips pressed tight. But Tia wasn't done. "Our next witness," she said, turning toward the back of the courtroom, "is the plaintiff's mother, Mrs. Diane Monroe." The room hushed as my mother walked to the stand. She looked tired, composed, but resolute. After taking the oath, she sat down and looked at the judge with clear, unwavering eyes. Tia approached gently, her tone softened. "Mrs. Monroe, did Olivia ever mention anything about the nature of her relationship with Mr. Carter?" My mother nodded, then spoke slowly and clearly. "She came to my house one night, crying. Said she was confused and ashamed. That Craig told her he was going to leave Amber. He said Amber was crazy, that she wouldn't let him go without making a public mess. He promised Olivia he was just waiting for the right time." A ripple moved through the courtroom. No one moved, no one breathed. Craig dropped his gaze to the floor, his mouth slightly open. Leo leaned in again, more frantic now, whispering something into Craig's ear that made him wince and look away. It was the moment the air changed, heavy with exposure, undeniable and raw. There were no more angles to spin, no more lies to bury the truth beneath. The money, the manipulation, the affair, it was all out there. Greed, cowardice, betrayal. Every thread Craig had tried to keep hidden had finally unraveled in full view. When the final day arrived, the courtroom was quiet in a different way. It wasn't the anxious, prickling tension of uncertainty anymore. It was the sharp stillness that comes just before something ends. Judge Burnett sat high on the bench, glasses low on his nose, reading from the final ruling with a steady voice that cut through every inch of noise that had once surrounded this mess. The court officially granted the divorce, citing adultery and moral turpitude as the cause. The language was clear, deliberate, and left no room for misinterpretation. Craig wasn't just leaving a marriage. He was being held responsible for everything he tried so hard to bury. Then came the terms. Craig was ordered to pay me $57,000 in compensation for emotional and psychological damages, along with financial restitution for his misuse of our joint assets. Every shared account was to be closed immediately, and the house, the one I had once thought we'd grow old in, was to be sold. The profit would be split 70-30 in my favor. The judge added, without pause, that Craig was prohibited from approaching me in any way without my written consent. No calls, no messages, no appearances. He would be violating a court order if he did. Craig looked stunned, as if he still believed there would be a lifeline somewhere in the room. He opened his mouth, ready to launch into one last defense, one last desperate attempt to shift the narrative. But before a single word could escape, Judge Burnett raised his hand and spoke with crisp finality. "This is not the room for your play, Mr. McFarlane." And that was it. Craig closed his mouth, sank back into his chair, and didn't speak again. I stood up, collected my things, and walked out of that courtroom feeling something I hadn't felt in over a year. Complete clarity. Not victory, exactly. Something quieter, stronger, like finally putting down a weight that was never mine to carry in the first place. 2 months after the trial ended, I signed the lease on a bright, third-floor apartment that overlooks a quiet park where families walk dogs and kids run in the afternoon sun. The first morning I woke up there, sunlight spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I stood barefoot on the balcony with a coffee in hand and just breathed. No calls, no lawyers, no half-truths hiding behind apologies. Just air, quiet and clean. I took a short trip to Utah the week after moving in. Nothing extravagant, just me, a rental car, and the kind of silence you can only find in the middle of red rock and sky. I hiked alone, stayed in a little cabin outside Moab, and spent a lot of time doing absolutely nothing. It wasn't a vacation in the traditional sense. It was a reset, a chance to let my brain and my body remember what stillness felt like. I came back sunburned, sore, and feeling more like myself than I had in years. Last week, I made a new Reddit account. I've been lurking here forever, reading stories that reminded me I wasn't the only one living through madness. So now I'm leaving this here, anonymously, in case someone else out there is standing in the middle of their own disaster wondering if it ever ends. It does. Maybe not quickly, and definitely not cleanly, but it does. It was the worst year of my life. But it was also the beginning of a new one.